So by now, most of us have gotten pretty used to the shape of DC, but have you ever stopped and really looked at it, wondering why it looks the way it does? I mean, it's this perfect diamond, and then it looks like Cookie Monster took a bite out of it. Now, I'm here downtown at Farragut Square, and I'm thinking maybe I forgot the alphabet. Let me tell you why. Right over here, we got I Street. Right over here, K Street. So something's clearly missing here. J Street, playing Carmen Sandiego on us. So they say that Virginia's for lovers, or is it really just for fighters? I mean, that flag, pretty brutal. So who are these two toga-wearing warriors? Let's start with the one on top. That's the Roman goddess Virtus. She's got the spear in one hand and the dagger in the other. Basically, she's a cross between Xena and Ronda Rousey. If she was a Pokemon character, her skills would be heroism, righteousness, and the big one, freedom. So let's start with a definition. Senate.gov describes a continuing resolution as legislation to provide budget authority for federal agencies and programs till a regular budget returns. Think of it as a budget band-aid. It'll pay for a couple weeks while Congress tries to figure out a long-term budget. First, let's get into the numbers. According to JLL, this real estate firm in the city, there were 156 coffee shops represented by each one of these coffee beans right here in October of 2017. But in the 3 months that followed, it's skyrocketed. All right, so we all know that elephants are huge, but we want to show you just how big they are. And to do this, I'm going to need a little help. Help from more Evans, just like me and that guy over there. What we're going to do is a little experiment where we round my weight up to, say, 200 pounds, and then we show how many of us equals one elephant. And right out of the gate, we could tell you 3 of us is not going to be enough. Even 10 of us is not going to be enough to match one elephant. What we really need is 60 Evans. That is way too much Evan. Sex trafficking. Right now, as we speak, it's happening. In the next couple of minutes, I'm going to introduce you to people who have been trafficked. Young people who live in our area who are currently trying to escape sex trafficking. But for me, this all started with a car ride. In the front seat was a really awesome woman named Tina Front. She is a survivor of sex trafficking, and she really knows what she's talking about. We were driving in the dead of night. It was just after 2 in the morning, and we just saw so much. Honestly, things that made me angry.
These are pimps. There they all are.
She said it so casually at times, where I was like, how could you be so casual about something like this?
Okay, right here too. That's a P. Yep, he a P. He a OG actually. She's working.
She's working? We also saw a lot of victims, girls and boys working the streets.
Right here to our left. So, trans, young. Yes, yes, she's working.
What got me was that this was downtown. Downtown, the center of commerce, and yet we've got these young teenagers that are being trafficked right in front of our eyes. I think there's a disconnect when you're out there driving and you see these grainy images. They almost seem like adults. You could forget that these are young people. For me, that all changed when I actually got to meet some of them. We went to a safe house for a group called Courtney's House. We saw these teenagers, young girls we're talking about, 13 to 15. They were talking about love, of all things. Miss Tina would lead them in discussion, asking them things like,
what does love mean? There's no right or wrong answer.
Love is something that, when somebody really cares for you, they show you honesty, and then they show you that you can trust them. If that person treats you right or shows you everyday proof that you mean it.
I'll tell you, that was the painful part for me, was actually meeting these young girls, hearing them laugh and talk, and then knowing that they were the same grainy images we had just seen out on the streets. That was painful.
I'm not in an angry place with my life now, you know?
Then I heard Tina's story, which was horrifying. She was born in foster care and was living in Chicago. Eventually, she was adopted, but she was vulnerable. She was looking for a role model, and that's when she met this guy, 15 years older than her. He was 28 years old.
And he told me he grew up in foster care, and he told me that he was adopted, and then his family gave him back after a year. You know, none of these things were true, but I believed it was true, and what he was trying to do was bond with like my story.
Then came her 14th birthday, a day that would forever change her life. She got in this big fight with her parents over curfew. She wanted to stay out later, they said no, so she stormed out of the house and she called that guy.
I get in the car. But I think we're just gonna go driving down the street, and my intention is to come back home. But we started to drive in Chicago, the signs are changing, you know, getting further out on the highway. And I'm like, where are we going? And he's like, look, I'm on my way to Cleveland, because he had a family business.
Eventually the car stops and they get out, and they're in front of an 8-bedroom home in a gated community. It's beautiful. It's not some shed.
When I get in the house, there are 4 other girls there that are all under the age of 16. And 2 other guys, and no one's thrilled to see me. Nobody's happy or anything like that. There was no phone, you know, when I went in there, and there was no windows. And then the next process is a seasoning process. So the door locks, you know, and there's not a phone or anything. And 2 other guys come in, and they sexually assaulted me, and that's actually called the seasoning process.
That term, the seasoning process, a sick way of saying she was raped. That sent her on a decades-long road of being trafficked. Do you ever cry?
Yeah, I definitely cry. You know, I think that everybody works on their things, and growing up, I was never really good at showing emotion in front of people, you know, definitely. Probably the people who get me to cry is the kids. You know, they get me to cry when they had straight F's and they got a C for the first time. I cry all the time, ask them.
So I'm looking at all this, and I'm listening to her story, and I'm just getting frustrated. I'm thinking, what can we do? Can we do anything to try and stop this? Well, we're going to try something a little new here. Miss Tina's agreed to create a number of videos for specific audiences. One for young people, one for parents, one for community members. And the hope is that we could watch these and share them, and together maybe we could put a dent into this problem.
Because I promise you, everybody that watches this show has come into contact with somebody that was trafficked. Whether you knew it or didn't, you did it. You did. And I need them to see it's not like Taken. It's nothing like that. It can be Ward 7 or it can be in Tinleytown. It can be at Tyson's Corner, or it can be down the street. That's just the real reality of it. Assuming that our kids are safe because we live here and we live there, no kid is safe, because this is about manipulation, and every child can be manipulated.
I didn't know what was happening. I just didn't understand why he wasn't able to do the things that he used to be able to do.
As we sit here in her living room, Kathy Siggins hangs on to the memories. After all, that's all she has left of her late husband, Gene. The two met while working at the post office and quickly found love. March 30th, 1978, the two got married. These are the happy memories. A decade later, they would fade into a darker period. Gene was starting to forget things.
He would bring in wood, and then he would feed the fire, feed the fire, feed the fire, and it was like, whoa, this is not good.
And so the two went to the doctor, only to get devastating news.
And they said, Mr. Siggins, you have Alzheimer's, and we strongly recommend that you get your affairs in order.
From there, things quickly got worse. As he started forgetting, Kathy stopped being his wife and became a caregiver.
The husband that I had was no longer there. He took pride in being a good provider for his family, and he did well. And to watch him go from there to like my child, that was hard.
For 10 years, Kathy lived in this purgatory of sorts, caring for her husband and watching him fade. On January 24th, 1999, Gene passed away.
When he died, it was like I felt that there was a reason why we were taken on this journey, and that it wasn't supposed to die with him.
And so began Kathy's new role, not as a victim or a widow, but as an advocate, telling her story and raising money for Alzheimer's research. But one achievement has always eluded her. This is the semi-postal breast cancer stamp. In 20 years, it's raised more than $86 million. So Kathy thought, why not get one of these for Alzheimer's? For 18 years, she's been pushing for it, collecting some 85,000 signatures, and yet for 18 years, she's been told no.
I was told no an awful lot of times, you know, and the disappointment, I went through a lot of disappointment each time people would say no.
Disappointment for her husband, and disappointment for hundreds of families going through this. Finally, this year, it happened. The Postal Service finally said yes. The stamp is now a reality.
It was like this weight had been lifted after 18 years of waiting for this call, our family there.
In the years since Jean's death, a lot has changed for Kathy. She's remarried and has found peace in her husband's death. But she says her rigor and passion for advocacy is as strong as it was 18 years ago.
If we don't talk about this disease, no one will ever know what it's like to live it.
We've all been there before. You're driving down the road and then you see that flash of doom. You got yourself a speeding ticket, but you're definitely not alone. We decided to look at the numbers and just look at what we found. Last year, they collected some $170 million from speeding cameras, and in a 7-month period this year, the latest data they're giving us, they've collected some $87 million already. But we wanted to find the top hotspots, the places where you really want to slow down. While I keep driving, take a look at the map. Well, here we are, the biggest speed traps in the city. They've gotten me more than once. Number 5 on the list is at South Capitol Street, right next to the Nats Stadium. Listen to this, close to $5 million collected on this southbound camera. And this is what the camera looks like from down on the ground. As you can see, it's facing the southbound lane. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you look behind me, there's another camera that's facing the northbound lane. And while this one did not make the top 5, it is ranked number 7, bringing in another $4 million. So that means right here at this stretch of road, that's $9 million being brought in. Slow down when you're going by Nats Stadium. Meanwhile, stop number 4 takes us right here to K Street by 25th Street. Why don't we show you the exterior camera so you can get a real good look at this camera. It's that one, right there on the left. And man, this has gone a lot of money. So far in that 7-month period, $5.5 million has been collected. That's a lot.
It says photo enforced. It's the yellow sign, which is typical.
While in Foggy Bottom, we decided to pick up Councilmember Mary Che. Earlier this year, she wrote this letter to DDOT asking them to look at all of DC's speed cameras to find out if they're speed traps.
If the signage isn't working, I also wanted to know, well, maybe something else should work, because the ultimate objective here is not to give tickets. It's to have people drive within the speed limit and also not run red lights.
Now let's go to number 3 on the list. It takes us to 295 southbound as you head towards Maryland. About a mile south of exit 1, you'll find this camera. Here's a look from another camera angle. And I'll tell you, this camera got a whole lot of people. Nearly 41,000 tickets in this 7-month period for a whopping $6.3 million. That's a whole lot of cheddar. Meanwhile, number 2 on the list takes us back to Foggy Bottom to a very familiar sight. It's K Street, once again, literally across the street from number 4 on our list. The westbound camera this time has brought in more than 45,000 tickets, adding nearly $7 million in fines. And that brings us to number 1 on the list. It's this guy right here at 600 Kenilworth Avenue, and this one's made an absolute killing. It's given away 64,000 tickets for $11 million, again, in just 7 months. Here's what's confusing about it. It's not even facing Route 295. It's facing this side road. And when you look at it from the driver's perspective, things get even more confusing. When coming up to the camera, you do see that 25 miles per hour sign, but then as you get closer, you see the 50 mile per hour sign. That's for the highway, but very easy to think it's for you. So there you go, the top 5 locations in the city where you really need to slow down. Do you want to see where in your neighborhood some of these cameras are? Well, now you can. We put the entire list on our website, WUSA9.com. So take a look, find out where your neighbors have been caught the most.